Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. My name is Andy Green.
I'm Felix Schultz. How are you, Andy?
I'm fantastic, Felix. Feeling a little bit nostalgic. How are you?
Yeah, same. We've been having some chats recently about
Unlike
the
us.
old, yeah, virtual chats, not physical chats, about the old time machine and going back in time. If we could turn back time as Cher, was that Cher?
Yeah.
And we've been turning back the time to 2011, thinking about what we wished we knew back. What was
Mhm.
2011 like for you, Andy Green?
Geez, I was a young man starting his professional career,
Yeah, taking over
getting
the
into
corporate world.
watches, taking over the corporate world, wearing suits to work.
Nice.
I'm trying to think how old I was in 2011. I think I turned 21.
Jeez
20,
Louise.
no, I was 20. So, yeah. How
Gosh,
about you?
I don't know how old I was. Older than you, old enough to know better. But for me, I was all about heavy Instagram filters on like an iPhone 4.
hmm hmm
I dug up, we'll have to put one in the show notes or like in the promo material, but I dug up some 2011 wrist shots.
hmm
You can barely tell what watch I'm wearing. It's great. So ease up on those is what I would have said myself. And also, don't sell the Seiko Pogue. You'll regret that sale. Um, but I think we're going to sort of dig into what was going on 10 years ago, but also get some insight as to what we would, like to have done differently or wish we knew. And also, you've asked some people, Andy. We've
Mm.
gone out to the world, and
Hindsight is a wonderful and terrible thing.
I've got a better one.
What's that?
Hindsight is 2021.
2021 vision.
Oh God. But do you want to know what was happening in the watch world in 2011, Andy Green?
I was pretty focused on William and Kate's wedding, so I'll need you to fill
Ooh.
me in.
Well, the world was recovering slightly from the big global financial crisis. Well, I mean, it's probably hitting in other parts of the world.
Mm,
Watch land, the big sort of meme, the Hodinkee travel clock of the year, if you will, was
hmm
Charlie Sheen.
Okay, tell me what happened to you.
Well, he had a little his sort of famous online rants or meltdowns where he was talking about drinking tiger blood and all that sort of jazz that you may or may not remember.
hmm
And part of that was his prominent, he was sharing a lot of like content about his watches. So he's got like nice vintage Pateks, and he's like, "This watch runs on Warlock time," and that sort of became a thing in the watch world. Um, on a differently serious note, in 2011, the late great Gerald Genter passed away,
Oh, yes.
famous for many watches you can't buy at retail in 2021.
You probably could. I think you could get most of Gent's hot pieces back in 2021.
2011, to men.
2011. Yeah, 2011. You could get a
No,
Royal Oak or a Nautilus.
that's what I'm saying. Like in the 10 years since he's gone, it's
Uh,
all shifted. What do you think he would have made of the ridiculousness?
he probably would have made another watch, to be honest. taken, taken, partnered up with someone else. Do you know what else
Hey,
happened in 2011?
tell me
Through
what.
my research for this, watch auctions were really different back in 2011. They weren't super
Mm,
online. Philips, I don't think Philips had a watch department. But
mm.
what did happen was Roger Moore's Rolex Submariner that he wore in Live and Let Die was auctioned off.
Is that the
That
one
was
with the saw bezel? Like the
no, just like a regular 5513.
okay,
Um, sold for 219,000 francs, which I'm sure now would probably sell for, I don't know, going by the
hey,
last year,
is
20, 10,
is it
10, 15 times that.
isn't that the price for a regular 5513 these days?
No, yeah. No, it's not that bad. But for, a Bond worn watch, I imagine it's probably, you're talking a couple of $1 million now.
Crazy. I mean, crystal balls and all that. But there are also some interesting watch releases in 2011, and
hmm
continuing with the Rolex theme because they're sort of the barometer of this. 2011 saw the introduction of the current Explorer 2, the larger one with the white or the black dial,
hmm
um, which everyone's sort of expecting to be replaced or updated this year, given that it's the 50th anniversary of the Explorer.
50 this year, so it would have been 40th anniversary in 2011, which I guess they reintroduced the model. So you're thinking there's a 10-year cycle here.
Well, yeah, and it's fascinating. Like it is like clockwork. Do you think
Sometimes it is.
10 years is a fairly short cycle? I would have thought for a Rolex mainstream
Sometimes it
sports
is.
watch.
Sometimes it is. I mean, they like 50. They really do. I think it's more that Rolex like 50.
Hmm.
They did 60 obviously for the day date. Uh, the Submariner, which was the 50th anniversary Submariner, which was the Kermit. We didn't see anything for the 60th. We didn't see anything for the 40th. So I think that 50 is a good year that they like to celebrate. And then you kind of wait for
It's
100
well,
if we're
I mean,
still
it's
around then.
yeah. I mean, what else did we get from Rolex? We got two-tone Yacht Master 2.
Your favorite Rolex?
You know who does like one?
Who?
Carson Kressley.
He does actually. He
Yeah.
does.
I mean, the other interesting one we got is the first ceramic bezel Daytona,
Amazing.
the Everose chocolate brown model. It's still in the catalogue, or probably been
On a gator
updated.
strap. No, I don't know that they do it on the alligator strap anymore. It's funny that people didn't like that ceramic bezel. Going through the comments on the very few online watch media platforms that were around 10 years ago, because that's the thing that's changed as well. But
They didn't like the bezel.
people didn't really like the bezel. They didn't like the gold. It was obnoxious. They didn't like the prices. So if only you knew what was going to happen to the
Yeah.
prices of precious metal.
It's yeah, I was reading in my research, I was reading an SJX article from the time, and he's got collectors speculating if we might see a steel and ceramic Daytona one day. Like, yes, you
In
will.
theory, you will see them. You'll see pictures.
SJX will probably see one. Over at Patek, they released the 5270 perpetual calendar chronograph, which is kind of a biggie.
Sure.
And Jaeger LeCoultre, they released the Reverso Tribute to 1931, which was, I recall, the hot watch. People could not get enough of that when it was out. Like that was a sort of the one of the first sort of vintagey, like really on point vintage designs from like a big brand like that. And they loved it. It's now discontinued. Make of that what you
Yeah. Maybe we'll see something new this year.
I mean, we'll see
90th
Verso.
anniversary.
God, 91st, 92nd, 93rd.
Oh, well, they did the 80th. So who knows? But do
Mm.
you know what I do know?
What?
We need to take a quick ad break and then we'll be back.
Wunderbar.
This week's episode of OT the Podcast is brought to you by Tag Heuer, who have launched a new partnership with Porsche. And today we're going to have a chat about Tag Heuer and Porsche's long history that they share together. It's an exciting new relationship that, was launched with the release of the special edition Carrera Chronograph. But today we're going to go back to where it all began, the Carrera Panna Americana.
Indeed, we are, Andy. Now, the Carrera Panamericana is an open road race that ran in Mexico across the country from 1950 until 54. Funnily enough, it was started to celebrate the then new Pan American Highway. It only ran for 4 years because it was super dangerous.
Mm.
In the 4 years that it ran, 25 people, racers and spectators, unfortunately died.
Wow.
But while it was short lived, it did have an important legacy. Porsche, which raced smaller and less powerful cars than other competitors at the time, did well at the Pan Americana. It's a testament to their reliability and their sort of lightweight, best in class. A 550 Spider won the smaller sports car category in 53. And of course, from this came the Carrera name, which was first used on the 356 Carrera and then the 911 Carrera in 72. And more recently, the Panamera line in 2009 was also inspired by the race. It's
Icons.
really, yeah, it's such a cool and fascinating time for motorsports in general, because that race you saw not just like F1 races or rally races or like, stock or street races. You got all of them racing together in this sort of open category, open road extravaganza.
Mm.
And of course, it was also an important, event for Hoya. Jack Hoya attended the races, they timed the races, and famously, he was so inspired by the race that he named a watch, the Hoya Carrera. That debuted in 1963 and, of course, has been a massive hit ever since.
Yeah, so that's it's a big deal, and the motorsports is an important one for both. Obviously Porsche and Tag Heuer, and their big other association is the 24 Hours of Le Mans. For Porsche, it was their most significant track in terms of wins. I think it was 19 wins overall and 108 victories in class. For Tag Heuer, they've got a really strong movie link. Steve McQueen famously wore a Hoya and had the livery on his car and race suit as he sort of drove around in that Porsche Golf 917 in Le Mans. That watch then went on to be auctioned just late last year in 2020.
Mm,
The prop itself, and that was his Hoya Monaco chronograph. So not the watches we're talking about today, but it was worn by McQueen when he was filming Le Mans. It sold for 2.2 million US dollars, which was a record for any Hoya or Tag Heuer chronograph. And it's sort of the provenance and the association with the film is really kind of important and pivotal to the record result for the brand. And I mean, for me personally, it was cool, to actually meet Steve McQueen's son,
yeah,
Chad
nice.
McQueen, sorry, and his grandson Chase, I should say. So the family, still wears Tag Heuer. They're still very into motorsport. Chad was a professional race car driver. Chase is very much into it as well. They still have some of Steve's old Porsches, so the tie-ins are all there. And McQueen famously once said, when they were kind of putting Lamar together, he said, "I'm going to drive the same car as Joe Siffert, and I want to wear the same suit as him," which had the Hoya livery.
Yeah, and Siffert, Joe Siffert is sort of a legendary figure in Hoya, the Hoya sort of collecting world, and also in motorsport. So he had quite a unfortunately short-lived career. Like, he was just hitting his peak, and then
Hmm.
he died in a tragic accident. But he's significant for a few reasons. He was an early ambassador for Hoya. So
Yep.
Jack Hoya has said, and I'm quoting this: in exchange for 25,000 francs, he would put our logo on his car and suit. In addition, he would buy our watches at wholesale and then resell them to his racing friends in the paddock, which he did because half the F1 paddock was wearing Hoya watches by the end of the 1969 season. So this is like how wild those times must have been, like, where he's been paid this sum to, like, promote the brand in a pretty, like, sort of innocent way. And he's also
OG affiliate links.
yeah, he's also, like, hawking bloody Octavias to, all these, like, legendary races. Like, and that's why Jack Hoy is, like, such a, held up as, like, a marketing genius, I suppose.
Mm,
Um, he's also a really important Siffert is also a really important figure for Porsche. In 1968, he won the 24 Hours of Daytona and the 12 Hours of Sebring races in the States, racing a Porsche 907. They were both the first major outright wins for the brand, which was a big deal. Of
mm.
course, we can't talk about Hoyer and certainly Siffert without talking about Formula One. It's a whole other sort of deep dive. We could do a an episode or a series on it. Siffert, of course, had the first non-automotive deal, like commercial deal, with Hoyer in
Wow.
F1's history, which kind of changed modern marketing in some
Wow.
ways.
Certainly
And
for
then
watches.
yeah, and another really great Hoyer story that I like from F1 is the story around the Carrera 1158, which was the gold caliber 11 that Jack Hoyer presented to F1 drivers in the 70s. So, like, sponsored teams or friends of brand and ambassadors, and they had the driver's name engraved on the back. Hoyer also, has legit links because they supplied timing equipment to, the Formula One.
Totally, and again, if we're talking about the current day, they're heavily involved in Formula E. They've got a racing team which has been sponsored by Tag Heuer since 2019, which is pretty cool. And this is where they're running the all electric 99X race car, and it's an important category for motorsport. It's exclusively electric cars, so what they like to say is 100% emotion and 0% petrol. When you're talking cars that hit 100 kilometers an hour in 3 seconds, and
Oh,
Tag Heuer being a founding partner and official is the founding partner and the official timekeeper of the Formula E championships. So it's a really exciting sort of look at the future of automotive sports with these two great legacy brands and that have sort of been dancing and weaving around each other for such a long time.
They share a name, and that name Carrera sort of comes together on this new watch that we've talked about before, and we'll link up images. You've got to see the dial; it's really, really quite fascinating. It's the Tag Heuer Carrera Porsche Chronograph Special Edition that's priced on leather at 8,450 Australian and 8,750 on steel bracelet. It's not a limited edition, and it comes in special co-branded packaging.
To discover more about the partnership between Tag Heuer and Porsche, as well as the new Tag Heuer Carrera Porsche Chronograph Special Edition, head to tagheuer.com/Porsche or visit your local Tag Heuer boutique. Now, let's get back to the show. Felix, so we get a bit of fan mail, a few emails here and
Is it
there. Some people DM us, shoot us
fan
things through the
mail?
website. Well, if you're listening, you're a fan. Um, and we had a guy named Bruce hit us up recently with a bit of feedback, a couple of ideas, and we actually asked him. We asked him, Bruce, what do you wish you knew? He said he'd been collecting watches, I think, 4 years,
Oh, yeah.
and
Oh, it's gone
he'd spent
hard.
a bit. He'd gone hard. I was pretty impressed with how hard he'd gone in such a short period of time. So he said, Bruce, what have you learned? What do you wish you knew 4 years ago before you went and spent 100 grand on watches in 4 years? And we got some feedback, Felix.
It was good
So
feedback.
and it started, sort of started this whole kind of episode idea, and it rolled into me asking on Instagram for some people for what they wish they knew, which we'll get into.
Sure.
Bruce is interesting. So he wishes he knew to try on every watch that he could.
Yep.
Um, he said that a watch can look great and not wear great, and that's important to do before buying it online. Buy before you wear it, because shopping on the internet can be a costly exercise if it doesn't work out for you.
Mhm.
He also said I should have not let great watches go to chase mediocre ones, and maybe going to meetups and kind of connecting with the community more would have prevented it. It's a very
Sure.
good point. Very good point. He also has a few regrets. He's read everything available. He's bought books and he's dived through watch blogs. So
And listen to watch podcasts.
and listens to watch podcasts. So he didn't really specify what his regrets were, but I think he's probably alluding to them through points 1 and 2. Maybe
Buying
his
buying
books
watches that don't fit well.
don't
Hello,
fit well,
Reverso tribute to 1931.
and chasing mediocre watches. So yeah, I did this poll and I asked people, what do they wish they knew 10 years ago,
Was this
and
on your Instagram at Andy Green Live?
yeah, irrelevant information, but yes.
It's not ever relevant. It's always you gotta promote the personal
Not
brand.
not, not necessary at all.
We do it at the end of the episode, don't worry, and it's in the show notes.
Just an unnecessary point to bring up.
No,
Um,
no, no. I mean, it's what did the people tell us,
okay,
Andy?
so uh, one bloke said watches are easier to store than bikes and cars, which is true. They're small objects, even with the boxes. Even if you have it all, they're pretty small to store,
Yep.
easy and discreet.
Oil stains are
Um,
less of an issue.
Oil stains are less of an issue. I would have thought he'd realise that just by looking at a watch and a car and just sort of making that visual
You
comparison.
need 10 years of
Um,
experience to work that out.
it's
Oh,
finally
my
sunk in.
garage full of Ducatis is getting big.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. The next point I really like, the one day, I'll get one day attitude is now unlikely.
Oh god, that
You're
stings,
guilty
Andy.
of this, aren't you? This is
So
one.
much.
This has haunted you your whole life.
It's the common refrain, the old bloody Rolex Polar Explorer that I should have bought back in the day for $7.99 and a packet of chips.
There's no rush, and I think the whole "I'll get one day" attitude is there's no rush. I can always get one later, and then
But
sort of you
it's
just
not
wait.
unreasonable though.
No, it's not. It's like it's the most rational thing to do. Don't impulse buy watches, because they'll always be around. You can always get one. The caveat there is prices have kind of skyrocketed, and that $4,000 or $5,000 watch that you wanted 10 years ago has every
Mm,
potential to be a 12, 15, 20, even $30,000 watch. So it's potentially
unless I
unlikely.
was saving up for something like a Panerai in 2011, I'd probably have a better deal now on a vintage Panerai.
That Panerai you couldn't afford in 2011, you can
I
probably
can now buy
buy
3.
instead. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can just about buy a boutique. What else have we got? How much I'd love them now, and to buy a bunch before we have kids. All right, 2 points there. So you didn't realize how hot he would go into the hobby,
Sure.
and to buy before we have kids. Felix, you have a kid. Do you wish you bought more watches before your young
What
fella came
I
along?
think it's. I mean, kids is. You don't. It doesn't have to be kids, but it can be for like other grown-up expenses. Like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's a mortgage instead. Like, when you've got disposable income, dispose it
Yep.
on good stuff, like not you know beers. All those
Beers, yeah, or
beers I drank in my
mortgages.
20s could have been.
Yeah, buy a
Well,
watch instead.
yeah, buy uh, I mean that's true, but I mean you've everything has got to sort of make sense and be responsible, and yeah, I mean I bought more watches back then than I did now, but I think that's also where you're at. Like I reckon there's people that are just getting into the hobby now that have kids and families and commitments that still go through that process of buying
Yeah.
heaps of watches and then slowing down.
Mm,
I could be wrong.
mm. That's good advice. Buy Steel Rolex. Okay, so we've got about 15 all talking about buying Steel Rolex. Yeah, we
Shock,
get it.
shock.
I mean, look, I wish I knew too that a Hulk would sell 3 times retail in 10-year period.
It's interesting though. The person that wrote that in was unpopular. I think when it was released,
It
like it
was,
was a
yeah,
bit of
yeah.
a oh, that's a bit weird. Like
I mean,
compared to the other one.
it used to be cheaper to buy a Hulk, pre-owned than new. It's just a crazy. It's crazy to think about. Cheaper to buy it pre-owned, even not even a scratch on the watch, and it was still cheaper. There was a time, people, when you bought a Hulk, and you probably lost 20% when you
Yeah,
bought it, which is wild. So yeah, I think everyone wishes that they knew they should have bought a bunch
or
of Steel
not sold
Rolex 10
them.
years ago.
Or
Yeah,
whatever
or
that
not sold them.
the whole Rolex steel discussion is there.
Yeah, I think everyone's well aware of that. What else we got? Buy watches for yourself, not for other people. This was repeated a few times.
Yeah,
I really like it. I
one of
like
my
that as
big
a point.
takeaways. I think.
Have you ever bought a watch for other people?
No, I generally only buy things for myself. No, I think for my take on this is buying something that I like because I like it, and not going listening to what everyone's saying at that
Mm,
time. Oh, this is the best watch. You've got to buy this watch. Like the one example that I think I've sort of spoken about before is that the Seiko Monster. Like I
yeah.
bought that when I was first getting into watches because everyone said it's a great watch. You've got to have it. I didn't really like it. I never
Mm.
really liked it, but I still bought it. That's probably a bit of there's other sort of trendy examples, like, I was thinking, like, back in the early 2000s, like, the Zenith Captain Windsors were really, really
What is
trendy.
that?
It's they're cool watches, like, they're sort of, chrono calendars designed with movements with, Ludwig Erschelin stuff in them. But they were a bit hot, and they were a bit cool, and they had a moment. How many do you see around now? Like
Well, considering I've never heard of them before,
yeah, I mean, it's like a trend. Like, that's my sort of, like, you gotta notice trends and maybe just be aware of that, like,
like
there's a
the
lot
massive
of
watch thing.
yeah, but even specific models like this year, like in the last few years, the Bulgari Octo Finissimo is super cool, and a
Mm.
lot of that is because it's cool, and I hope it continues to be cool. But there's a chance it'll also, you know, peter out in terms of its cachet.
You think that the Octo Finissimo is a trend?
It's trendy, whether or
It's
not
pretty trendy.
whether or not that trendiness sustains, or
Mm.
whether or not it goes out of fashion remains yet to be seen.
Fascinating. Yeah,
Mm.
I see this more. I don't think I've done this necessarily, but I see this really often, and yeah,
What about the
it's.
Tudor though? You bought your Black Bay
Mhm.
when it was like super cool.
It was, yeah. Yeah,
How do
but
you
I
feel about
love
that
that
now?
watch. That is a watch. Well, I had that watch for like, I think 3 or 4 years in the end. Got it right when it came out. The blue black bay with the ETM movement, so 42. And at the time, again, I bought this. I should have listened to bloody Bruce because I bought that watch without really trying it on.
Mhm.
Got it from
You couldn't.
Interstate.
Did you have to wait on that or?
I had to wait like a week or something. I don't
Yeah, okay.
early days of the watch plug. But I got like an interstate dealer to hook it up. Um, yeah, I sold it because it was too big in the end, and it was like
Sure.
a slab for me.
Yep.
I loved it, and then I think as you mature and you kind of get more into any hobby, you kind of refine what you're actually into. And for me, it was sort of when I got it, I wished that I didn't buy all of these sort of cheaper watches, and I bought that.
Mm.
And then when I had it, I kind of wish that I'd spent a bit more and bought, like a
a
Rolex sub
sub or
for
whatever. Yeah,
2 grand more, which it would, I think that was like a $4,000 watch, and a sub was like six.
like a secondhand sub you could have picked up
Yeah,
for.
secondhand sub was like
Yeah.
six. But it was just too big in the end, and that's why I
Mm.
sold it. So I wouldn't have said I bought it for anyone else. I think, and maybe that's when I see people buying these big watches. Like there are certain models that I just
But
don't think anyone can pull off size wise. But you still see people kind of, I don't know if they're lying to themselves, but they just buy
I
things
reckon
and you wonder.
surely you were like being caught up in the hype a bit though, of like because everyone love it. Like that was the
Yeah,
golden age of
maybe
the black bag. Like,
that
and
was the
sometimes you
blue.
can't avoid it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. What next? What else did
Maybe.
the people have to say?
Well, the power of saving up for one good watch instead of buying so many cheapies.
Oof.
Yeah, I mean,
This
it's
is
easy to look
hard.
back. It's easy to look back and kind of go, if I hadn't have bought those 5 watches, I could have,
I
a
mean,
Tudor or an IWC or something.
but also I wouldn't have had fun. You wouldn't have learned along the way in some ways.
That's
Like,
part of it, is like the learning for me anyway.
yeah,
I look at, yeah, but then it's like, look at your current collection. You can just say, oh, well, if I have five $10,000 watches, why don't I just buy one $50,000 watch? Like, I don't know that. I think for a lot of people, it's not about one good one anyway. It's about
having a bit of variety and
variety.
different
Yeah,
stuff for different things.
yeah. Because, and then I tell you what, as soon as you have one really, good one, that sets a new threshold. That for me is the big thing. Is like you set thresholds, and then that's sort of where you hang out at, and then it just keeps getting
Yeah, you
raised.
see that. I see it, with guys like they're like, yeah, I'm going to get a Lunger, and they're like, that's the exit watch for me, and then they're like,
Mm.
now I'm going to get a Lumen, I'm going to get a petrol calendar, and like it gets a bit crazy.
Because you've spent that money before. So you've just like normalized it. You've just made it okay. Um, Here's another one. A
Hmm.
watch that ticks boxes isn't necessarily a good watch for you.
Seiko Monster.
I mean, I mean, every you'll find a Seiko that ticks every single box that you could possibly have. Um, Nothing against Seiko, but yeah, you could say this isn't the right watch for you. Maybe I think what this person's saying is that you shouldn't be looking to really tick boxes because,
For the
I
sake
mean,
of it.
for the sake of it, because otherwise maybe you'll end up with a G-Shock. Do you know what I mean? Like a
Well,
G-Shock's going to serve every function that you could possibly need.
I also think is that there's that sort of mentality. Like if you're on the watch chatter forum places, they're
Mm.
like, oh, you've got to have 200-meter water resistance before you get it wet, and it's got to have an in-house movement, and it's got
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
have a sapphire crystal. You don't need all that, like you know.
Mm.
And if you do that, you end up with a watch that's sort of going to be a bit homogenous. Like it's going to be, um, it's going to look like a particular thing. They're going to, oh, it's got to be steel with a black. Like it'll all,
Integrated bracelet, blue
yeah.
dial, yeah,
And
40
it's like,
millimeters.
really, I just wanted a,
Just
Cartier
one that
tag
I
from
like
the
the look at.
80s.
Yeah,
You, you
true.
know, so
True.
and that
All
takes
right.
time. Like if you're in that sort of group, it's like, guys, I got $5,000 to spend on a watch. What should I buy? Everyone's going to suggest like 6 watches maximum.
Mm.
And it takes time to
Interesting.
work out. You should just buy that weird old, I don't know, whatever it is that you
Just
first.
buy smart and buy the one that speaks to you.
Or don't buy
If you
smart. I
Yeah.
don't buy smart. I'm happy not buying smart.
Yeah. Yeah, but when I say buy smart, it's like if you find a watch that speaks to you and it
Mm.
has, it's 40% cheaper, if it's 3 years old,
Uh,
buy the 3-year-old one
Is this
and just
like
enjoy
you?
it.
Is this you saying you want to buy GPC Hawk too?
Exactly. Like if you're the guy who wants that Seahawk and I'm in love with this watch, I'm desperate, must have this watch, then at least do me that favor of just going and buying it pre-owned. Buy smart. Um, Perfect. All right. Bigger isn't always better. Yeah, agree. 100%. How crazy the prices of all routers would go.
Sure.
Yeah, apply that to so many vintage,
I mean,
watches
and
and
I
vintage
think
brands.
polar routers are still a little bit accessible. Even I reckon they're
Oh
going to go
yeah,
up
who
more.
knows? Yeah, probably. I mean, but yeah, who
Yeah,
knows? Who knows? I mean, we saw it with vintage Hoya for a hot minute there. It's worth waiting for what you want, not just filling a gap. Also, Tudor subs. Yeah, Tudor subs.
should
Awesome.
have subs.
Yeah.
I
Worth waiting for what you want, not just filling a hole.
I'm a big fan of that. And that's
Mm,
something that I would like to have known that a little bit earlier in my collecting career. That I think the
y-
weighting also clarifies what you want. Like, you know
yeah,
me, Andy, I've been like refining the next watch I'm going to buy for like at least the last 4 years.
yeah. I
Uh,
think well, there's no rush, right? And this is something early on when I first got into watches. Someone said to me, "There's no rush on luxury,"
Oh,
and there, like, you can feel rush, and it can feel like there's new releases, and you get into it, and you kind of constantly see people around you getting things. But I mean, what I've personally seen and experienced a lot of is that patience is like the number one virtue when it
sure.
comes to watches. There are a few exceptions, and that's going to be the stuff that the piece uniques or these the crazy examples that you
All
see
that,
at auction.
yep, all that
But
ridiculous buy it now sort of moment where something's well below retail and you know it's good. It
well,
happens
what
every so
happens when you
often.
buy things you don't want to fill a gap is you end up spending probably more money than you needed to.
Yeah.
You can also confuse the message, and this is if you're talking about new and you're sort of faced with a watch dealer who says, "Oh, I don't have this, but I've got that." If you take something that you don't really want, call it an AP or a Patek or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
your dealer calls you up and says, "Hey, I've got this watch. I know you don't want it. I know you want this other one, but do you want this instead?" And you say yes. You've just taken them off the hook for the watch you really want, and you've waited for 2
Oh
years
God, that's true.
because and I've seen this happen so many times, but
Guys, I
in
don't
their
really
eyes,
like the Milgauss, but they're offering it to me now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's like if you take that watch, then in their eyes, they've just satisfied you. Like they've just given you a watch, right? And it
Yeah.
could even be a hot watch. It could be a two tone sea dweller. It could be whatever that a lot of other people want. But if you don't want it, they've just still given you a popular watch, and
Mm,
now you're back down to zero on the customers we need to
yeah, yeah,
to allocate something to.
yeah.
Not
That's
only
a really good
that,
point.
yeah, you've just spent money on something you don't really want. If you're going to keep it, you've got something you don't want. If you sell it, you're probably going to lose money, but you've just wasted even more time. The best thing you can do, and this is what I tell absolutely all of my friends, is be really focused with what you want and what you ask for, and you're
Don't
more likely
accept.
to get it. And don't accept other things.
This is
And
interesting
yeah,
because someone else has said start buying Rolexes early on with companies to establish relationships. Does
yeah.
that how does that fit into that? Like that sort of
I mean, look, part
record of
two.
credit.
Maybe there's an episode on Andy's tips for getting Rolex at retail, but part. but
That's Rolex has got to take us off the air. They've got to pull the
yeah,
plug.
just be redacted the whole episode. Um, I think what they're saying here is, if you're potentially buying things pre-owned or secondhand, look, there was certainly a moment in time where
That was a
you
smart
know
thing to do.
it was if a watch lost only 10% when you were getting it, buy it from the dealer because the dealer's gonna, you're building a profile with that dealer,
Yeah.
and then the watches were sort of level, pre-owned, new,
I,
didn't really matter what you got,
well,
and now it's
I also don't think like for the majority of consumers, like unless you're in the space where you're buying super high end,
yeah,
like if you're just wanting to buy nice watches every so often, having that dealer relationship was never that important.
mm,
I remember like at 10 years ago, I guess, like people saying fight deal like put one dealer against each other and say like, well, these guys are offering me that, what can you do?
yeah,
And that's normal. Like in any other thing, that's normal. Whereas now it's
relationships is everything.
yeah.
It's all about the relationship. So, I mean, a good relationship's going to take you very far. So, I understand what's happening here. And I mean,
Mm.
the other thing is, I see a lot of people that, yeah, even now they might. It comes back to that patience thing, but they might buy a watch that has a 5% premium, which is nothing. It's like,
Sure.
okay, in your mind, maybe you're like, it's $500 more,
That's
or
an
it's a
impatience
grand
tax.
more.
Yeah.
That's an impatience tax. Now, if you come back to being patient and you just waited and said to your seller, your dealer, hey, I want this next one. Whenever you get me one, perfect. Then you've just become a customer,
Got
and
some
then
credit.
you've got some credit. You're on their radar.
Mm.
So it's a really interesting topic. But yeah, maybe one day.
And well, what else? What else are people talking about?
That I needed them. I don't think
I
don't
don't think
think
you
you need
do.
them, buddy.
No.
But
And
sure,
the next related one, I wish I would have known there's no way out. There is a way out.
yeah.
Stop buying watches.
Yeah, just stop. Just stop it. Yeah, sell them all and yeah, you're done.
Buy an Apple
Um,
Watch. It does the
give them
same
away.
thing.
Give them away. That I should have purchased multiple Daytonas and Patek Philippe as they were more readily available.
Sure.
Goodness
You
me.
and me both.
Sure, we get it. Custom watches are not investments. Hmm.
Do you reckon that still holds? I mean, definitely back then. Do you reckon that still holds true today?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anything you customize is going to be very unique to you.
Unless it's like the one thing that like pops off for whatever reason, but it's not. No, I don't.
Oh,
I
actually, some of that Artisan de Genève stuff has,
even
which is
like
technically custom.
early
I
Bamford
guess
as well.
early Bamford's pretty held pretty strong. I guess are you talking, yeah, personalized customization? So it's sort of a unique piece to me, or
Mate,
sort of aftermarket
do you know how
customization.
much my dial artist Casio has appreciated in the 12 months or so that I've had it?
Have you flipped it?
No, but I'm just looking at Chrono 24. It's now worth $50,000.
Just push up the prices of
I'm
your
just hyping as much as I can.
customized
I reckon
Casio.
you could probably. I'd still say this, like that statement of custom watches are not investments. Take custom off, and I think the statement still holds true.
Watches are not investments. Yeah, don't view them as an investment. I think the one thing I sort of wish I knew back then, which might have changed my mindset on everything, is you kind of have to view it as view your watch collecting holistically, right? And when I say that, I mean some watches you'll make money on, some watches you'll make no money on, and some watches you'll lose money on. And I view it as an overall, almost call it a portfolio, right? Now my goal is not to make money, and it's not necessarily to lose money, but it's sort of to hover around that middle point of like, yeah, I might have a watch that is worth a couple of grand more, and then I'll have a watch that's lost a couple of grand. And I kind of and when I look at them all and I go, well, I'm up in this, I'm down in that. My net effect is pretty close to zero. That makes me really happy.
And that's what I was going to say. It's not about making money. It's about making happiness, Andy.
Yeah, and that's what makes me happy, right? And
Yeah.
further to that is, the other thing I like to say to people is, yeah, well, if you have a watch and maybe it's lost 30%, maybe it's $3,000, maybe it's $4,000, maybe it's 40. The other thing to bear in mind is that you can keep that watch as long as you really want to, and view the difference there as the cost of ownership. And if you buy a couple of watches and your whole thing is, yeah, I like to buy a few and then sell them, I get bored, so I buy more. It doesn't really make you a flipper. It's just maybe you're someone who just likes to move
Change your clothes every
through
so often.
random watches,
Yeah.
which is sort of still a really popular approach. And if you buy and sell five random watches and you sell five random watches, and at the end of the year you're down 2 grand. Well, you've had all of these different watches, and it's cost you $2,000, because that's the realized loss, if you will. That's not a
Mm.
bad kind of cost for a hobby when you kind of factor in what other hobbies might cost you.
Andy, we
Mm,
need to wrap it, but I want to end.
put a pin in it.
One thing you wish you knew 10 years ago. Doesn't have to be about watches. Just anything. Quick one. Go.
Uh, I don't know. I don't. You put me on the spot here.
I love putting you on
Trying
the
to-
spot. For me, I've got my Instagram filters.
You've got
What
your
about you?
Instagram filters.
Would you have got a better Instagram handle early on? Buy
I'm
some
going for
domain names.
buy some domain
Bitcoin.
names.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. You know what? I
Bitcoin.
was fucking in uni 2011, and this came up earlier today, so I'm going to tell. I was at uni. I had a couple of grand in the bank, and one of these kids sitting next to me was telling me about Bitcoin. It was $100 for like a Bitcoin back then.
You'd be a gajillionaire.
I'd be buying gold Patek. And I looked, and I was kind of like, he goes, "Yeah, no, you should buy some. You should buy some at $100." And instead of buying Bitcoin, I went out and spent like 2 grand on the weekend, just partying or whatever. Um,
2 grand on a weekend. Jesus,
we used to
Andy.
we used to we used to go hard.
Bottle service?
Yeah, I probably honestly, if I could learn anything, it'd be like not waste money on alcohol
Sure.
in your 20s, uh, and put it towards watches. But that's probably it. And that said, the Bitcoin thing, I mean, everyone can put that into hindsight. I would have sold it at like $1,000. Like I would have chickened out and sold it, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't be a billionaire. I might have made like a couple of grand, but
Yeah.
there's no way I'm holding it till 60K.
No. Instagram filters and Bitcoin.
What we wish we knew. This was a really interesting chat that started from someone emailing us and sparking an idea, and
Let's do
it's
more of it.
important. Yeah, let's do more of it, guys. So email us otthepodcast@gmail.com, or, hit us in a DM, or you can visit our website, otpodcast.com.au. There's a form there. You can contact us,
Mhm.
and maybe we'll,
It'll
spark a whole
spark a
episode.
conversation.
Yeah, who knows?
Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the people that participated in the poll. Thank you to Bruce for emailing us.
Proceed.
Thank you to this week's sponsors, Tag Hoya. You're great.
Boom.
Thank you to Major Tom Media. He's great. Thanks to you, Andy.
You're welcome.
I notice you're not
Thank you,
saying
Felix.
it. Thank you.
Arigato. All right, we will see you guys next week.
See ya.